Section 10.6, trigonometric ratios. Our essential question is, what are the three trigonometric ratios for a right triangle? The first vocab word that you see is an acronym, SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA is an acronym that helps us remember the three trig ratios that we're going to use, which are sine, cosine, and tangent. In red, you can see the letter S is in red. The S in SOHCAHTOA stands for the sine, which you often see abbreviated as sin, S-I-N. That's what the key on your calculator will say, because it's abbreviated to just 3 letters. So the sine of an angle in a right triangle equals the opposite side divided by the hypotenuse. So it's a ratio. A ratio is a fraction. So it's a fraction, opposite divided by hypotenuse. The next trig ratio is called the cosine, or abbreviated as COS. The cosine equals the adjacent side, so the side that is adjacent to the angle, divided by the hypotenuse. And then the third trig ratio is called the tangent. And tangent is abbreviated TAN. Tangent equals the opposite side divided by the adjacent side. So the letters in SOHCAHTOA, hopefully you can see where they come from. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So that's SOH. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, CAH. And tangent is opposite over adjacent, TOA. So if you can remember the spelling of SOHCAHTOA, it should help you figure out which side goes on the top of the fraction and which side goes on the bottom of the fraction for your ratio. Okay, so find the values of the three trig ratios for angle A. So our reference angle is angle A. So here's my angle A. We are going to find the sine, cosine, and tangent of angle A. These are all going to be fractions. So sine A, cosine A, and tangent A. In order to do that, we have to write our SOHCAHTOA up here to remember which sides we're talking about. And most importantly, we need to label this triangle. So based on where angle A is, I need to figure out which side is opposite, which side is adjacent, and which one is the hypotenuse. Now the hypotenuse, I hope you all remember, has to be the longest side in your triangle. It's across from the right angle. So my hypotenuse is 13. So that means that 13 is going to go where the hypotenuse is in my SOHCAHTOA, in my ratios. All right. Now, adjacent and opposite. Opposite of A, opposite of angle A, means across the triangle, the opposite side here is 12. It is not one of the sides that make angle A, that form angle A. It is the other side of the triangle. Then, that leaves me with adjacent. 5 is the adjacent side because adjacent means next to. The 5 is right next to the A. You could say the 13 is next to the A also, which it is, but the 13 is the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse is the longest side. So you always identify the hypotenuse first and then figure out opposite and adjacent. So now we can work with our ratios over here. SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 12, hypotenuse is 13. So the sine of angle A is 12/13. My next ratio, cosine, is adjacent over hypotenuse. Adjacent is 5, hypotenuse 13. 5/13. And last but not least, tangent is opposite over adjacent. So 12 is opposite, 5 is adjacent. So there are my three trig ratios for angle A. Next up, we need three trig ratios for angle B. So sine B, cosine B, tangent B. SOHCAHTOA. Okay, and my reference angle this time is angle B. So, first I need to identify my hypotenuse. Longest side, 15. Then I look for the opposite side, the 9 or the 12. Which one is across the triangle from B? Which side does not make the angle for angle B? Opposite is 12. And then adjacent, 9. So sine, opposite over hypotenuse, opposite is 12, hypotenuse, 15. This one reduces, so if I divide by 3, I would get 4/5. Cosine B, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent is 9, hypotenuse 15, reduce 3/5. And last but not least, tangent, opposite over adjacent. So 12 over 9, if I reduce it, divided by 3 gives me 4/3. So there are the three trig ratios for angle B. Our next problem says find the values of the three trig ratios for angle C, and it's got a little hint there saying find A first because you're not given all three of the sides. So to find A, we're going to have to do the Pythagorean theorem here. So A squared plus 9 squared equals 41 squared because 41 is your hypotenuse. C is our reference angle. So that makes the 9 opposite and the 41 hypotenuse, but we've got to find that adjacent side first. So 9 squared is 81, 41 squared is 1,681. So if I subtract 81 on each side, A squared equals 1,600. And then I would have to take the square root on both sides. The square root of 1,600 is 40. So A equals 40. So that means that my adjacent side, because that's the side that is next to the C, that's not the hypotenuse, so my adjacent side is 40. Now, SOHCAHTOA. So sine C, opposite over hypotenuse, 9 over 41. Cosine C, adjacent over hypotenuse, 40 over 41. And tangent C, opposite over adjacent, so 9 over 40. And none of those reduce. Another example like that last one. So angle A is our reference angle. So I've got my hypotenuse. I do not know the opposite side. I do know the adjacent side. So I need to do the Pythagorean theorem. So 13 squared plus B squared equals my hypotenuse squared. 13 squared is 169, and 85 squared is 7,225. If I subtract 169, I'm left with 7,056. And then I need to take the square root on each side. So the square root of 7,056 is 84. So my opposite side is 84. And now I can write my ratios. So sine A SOHCAHTOA, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So 84 over 85. Cosine A is adjacent over hypotenuse. So 13 over 85. And tangent A is opposite over adjacent. 84 over 13. And none of those reduce. Okay, our last slide is about using a calculator because we're going to be working into some problems where we need to be able to use a calculator for trig ratios, and it says round to the nearest 10,000th. So we've got tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So we need 4 digits after the decimal point. 4 digits after the decimal point. So if I put this in my calculator, sine 31 says 0.515038075. So we want 4 decimal places. So if I look at the 5th place, I've got a 3. So that means that I don't need to keep the 3. If it was a 5 or higher, it would round up. Anything lower than a 5 gets cut off. Okay, my next one, tan 76, says 4.010780934. 4 digits after the decimal point, right here. The 5th one is an 8, so that will round my 7, so it will be 4.0108. So it rounds my 7 up to an 8. And the last one, cosine 55, 573576436, 4 digits. The 5th one is a 7, so that means it's going to round up. So 0.5736. So rounding to the nearest 10,000th, you want 4 digits after your decimal point. You should be able to write a summary now answering the essential question. Make sure that you use complete sentences.